Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so companies can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Scott Berman. Hi, Scott.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Well, I'm really happy to have you as a guest on this podcast because we met each other through The Wealthy Contractor. And I was really impressed with what you did with your business. You were actually named the 19th largest home improvement, I don't know if named, but you are the 19th largest home improvement company in the whole nation, right?
Correct.
That is pretty incredible. And you were named Legend in Home Improvement Industry by David Yoho in 2021.
Also correct.
That's right. And then you're the co-founder also of HeavySet Technologies, which is a very cool software. And we're going to talk about that as well.
Yes. So that's my side job.
Okay, good. So tell us, first of all, I'm curious, what are the criteria to be named the Legend in Home Improvement Industry by David Yoho?
Truthfully, I have no idea, but I think it's somebody who obviously has integrity in our industry, is a certain size of a business, contributes back to the industry, and somebody who shows, has respect among their peers in the industry. So I think that's the criteria. I'm sure he has others. I'm honored to be a part of that group. It's a who's who of the home improvement industry. And obviously, Dave. Dave's, not only a magnanimous person, but just an unbelievable guy. So it's fun to call him a friend, and I speak to him often and enjoy the conversations that we have.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. So, Scott, let's start with your journey. So tell us about your career journey. Where did you start and how did you end up where you are at right now?
So I graduated from college and at University of Miami in Florida. And I was working at the time for Lennar, which is a large home builder. My father was in the replacement window business in Cleveland. And he had never asked me to go into the business or really shown any interest in going into or having me come into the business. So I was surprised when he asked me, but he asked me, and you really can't say no to your parents. So I went back and I worked for him. And the difference, he was a window manufacturer who sold direct to consumer. So he was a manufacturer of vinyl windows. And he didn't really believe in the one-call close. So what he did was he figured, hey, we'll send salespeople out to the house and we'll get our fair share of business. And, that's good. Everything's good. So that's really how I learned. And he ended up selling that business, and I didn't want to work for the people who bought it. So I ended up looking for opportunities in Florida. And I literally saw a guy, I was driving to lunch to meet my father and saw a gentleman replacing windows, literally installing windows as I was driving by somebody's house. I pulled over and started talking to him. And I decided that I was going to open a window company in Florida, which I proceeded to tell my dad at lunch, who told me I didn't know what I was talking about. I was crazy. How could you base a business? Do you have a business plan? How can you base a business on one guy you just met? And how many windows did he replace? And he replaced about
amazing encouragement, right? Amazing encouragement.
Right. It was amazing. It was amazing. He was actually right on a lot of it, actually, now in hindsight. But so I opened a window company down here in Florida. At that time, I had one of my dad's partners from another business who was also a family friend invested money with us, with me, and it was just a disaster. And we ended up going bankrupt, and then I started over with nothing. So, and built the company today to where it is, with the help of obviously my management team. But, you know, that's basically my story.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about that point when it was a disaster. What made it a disaster? Like looking at it now with what you know, and now you're coaching other companies how to be successful. You're a mentor. You know, you co-founded the technology company. Obviously, you know, you're very successful to build your company to be the 19th largest home improvement company in the country. Looking back with the knowledge that you have right now, what were the mistakes that you did that led you to bankruptcy?
I think listen, I think at the end of the day, there were two things that pretty much led to that situation happening. I think, first of all, it's very easy to sell. I mean, most of us can sell windows. It's not an issue. However, the operational efficiencies, the processes, the procedures, and ultimately the profitability often go untalked about or unnoticed. And I think when I look back, we were really concentrating on sales, but we couldn't execute on the operational side of the business. And you can appreciate this better than anybody. The operational side of the business is actually where money is made or lost. And so while everybody talks about, you know, their sales volume and how successful they are, the fact is that if you don't have these processes and procedures, you can't possibly grow and be profitable. It's impossible.
Absolutely, I agree with you, and that's what I see happening with companies. And it's like you can have a great sales process, you can sell, or let's say you hire a marketing company, they're doing amazing, and you market and you get all these leads, but if you cannot deliver, you can't. So your salespeople cannot get their commissions because people are not going to pay. The customers are going to be unsatisfied, and that's what happened. So give me some examples, some actual examples of how it failed in terms of operations.
First of all, we could sell, but we couldn't measure. What we measured wrong. What we were ordering, we didn't order on time. We had no quality control supervision, either in the warehouse or in the field. I mean, I could go on, but I mean, basically it was just catastrophic. So on one side, our sales department was selling, and on the other side, our operational team couldn't execute. So then, you know, you end up losing money on jobs. Customers are not happy. You have higher receivables. You can't pay your bills. You know, you're losing money. And so as a result of that, the company went bankrupt, and we deserved it. We deserved it. We deserved everything we got. It's really that simple.
Absolutely. Okay, so then what's the transformation? What happened after that?
The transformation was that I figured out that I was going to do it slowly and methodically, and I was gonna get it to a point where I believed that we had an operational opportunity to be successful. And I think that, you know, you mentioned mentoring these companies. What is amazing about mentoring companies is that everybody wants to grow, but they're not successful at their current size, and they ultimately think that growth is going to solve their problems. But in reality, most times it doesn't solve your problems. It actually makes you weaker. But everybody is so focused on volume and as opposed to profitability that they don't even understand what's going on. So as an example, you know, we go to all these conventions and these shows, and you hear speakers, and they talk and they talk and they talk. They're always talking about sales and marketing, because the operational side of the business is not pretty. It's not flamboyant.
Except me. I go to those conferences and I talk about operations.
You go, right. But for the most part, it's all predicated on sales and marketing. And if you ask somebody, how are you going to grow your business? And I just did a presentation on this at Brian's event. If you ask somebody how they're going to grow the business, their answer is, well, I'm going to get more leads. But at the same time of getting more leads, they don't understand that, okay, let's assume that you get more leads. In order to get more leads, your marketing budget may be higher, which means you have to raise your price. And can your operation survive the increase in business that your sales department is potentially bringing you? So normally what happens is that these companies grow, but then it's like whack-a-mole. The other side of their business is not growing in conjunction with the sales side. So they're not planning, they don't have good process, they don't have good procedures. And the company that did 5 million is now doing 10 on the same process and procedures that they did 5. It's the math doesn't work. So
Right.
that's what I see the most of.
Right. So how did you streamline your operations? What did you do in order to be successful and profitable?
We continue to break the systems. So effectively, if we were growing, we would break the system to the point of never admitting that it was good enough. And we've done that on in everything we do, no matter how successful or not we are, we continually, what I call, break the glass to get better. I'm not a person who is satisfied by nature. So if we make $100, I think we should make $120. If we're selling 10 million, I thought we should do 15. So as a result of that, we don't allow complacency to set in, and we're continually improving and networking and looking at people to do things to help us grow. And we're not afraid to ask for help. So, I would say that's really what made the difference. And my people are highly qualified to do the job that they need to do. They're experts in their industry. They're experts in their field. So, and they don't have crossover. So if my marketing guy is my marketing guy, my production manager is my production manager, and they stay in their lane. We work collectively and collaboratively, but they stay in their lane on what they do, because the minute they go over that lane, their input is helpful, but ultimately not correct.
Very good, Scott. It's definitely, those are very key components of every successful business. Is you have the right people, you train them, they're experts at what they do, and they have a very specific hat that they're wearing, and that is the hat they wear, and not everybody else's hats, because then you start getting into other people's and you're not doing your own. So the ownership, the accountability, and obviously you hold them accountable, right?
Yeah, and you also have to make it clear to your team members who they report to and what the expectations are. And if you do those things and hold them accountable, you're going to have a lot of people who are not going to work out in your organization, but the few that do will be super successful. And as you grow, some of those people that helped you grow from 2 to 4 may not be the people who can take you from 4 to 6 or 6 to 8. So you have to be cognizant of what the capacity is of your team, and you got to get out of the way. Like that's the other thing that I see all the time, which is the people that we talk to often don't trust the people, they don't trust their management team. And so I always use the analogy of it's a clock. And basically if I go from 12 to 6, if my team member goes from 12 to 6 and I go counterclockwise 12 to 6, I'm still getting at the same place. But you have to be willing to allow people to make mistakes. And the only way you can willingly allow people to make mistakes is you have to have exceptional profitability in your organization to overcome those mistakes. So, those are the things that I recognized after I failed.
Good. All right. Well, that's definitely good lessons. And tell me, why do you feel processes and procedures from your perspective and your experience are important to have in every company?
Well, first of all, in full disclosure, I'm not a process and procedure type of person because my mind doesn't think like that, which is counterintuitive to what you are. So it's,
But you are the visionary, and we're talking about the integrator.
Correct.
Totally. Totally fine. But from it's actually, no, but let's talk about it because I'm interested from your visionary viewpoint. Because here's what I see before I ask you the question again. Sometimes I will go into companies and there will be the visionary, and the visionary said, oh, processes and procedures are not important. But you just said yourself that when you don't have correct operations, when the processes are not followed, you can't really run a business. You can sell, you can have big ideas, but then the execution is not there. So from your viewpoint as a visionary, why do you think processes and procedures are important?
So as a visionary, I view my job as giving my team the direction on where we're going. I rely on them to implement that vision, and I stand out of the way in the way they build that process. I will criticize the process, but more importantly, I rely on them to define the process and the procedure, because I acknowledge in my thought process that I'm not good at that. So ultimately, if I'm not good at it, why do I want to do it? I don't want to do it. You know, the thing that I would also suggest to you is that going back to some of these meetings that we go to, you know, I can get an idea from a guy who does $1 million, from a company that does $1 million. The only difference between me and the person who does the $1 million is I can scale that idea. So I remember going to those meetings when I was small, and I would have, you know, I write down notes, and then I would turn around and I would send those notes to my team, and we would sit around on a 30, 60, 90, 120, and let's say 360-day goal, and we would knock those things out in days. So we're very quick. Like, you know, even when we deal with vendors or lead sources as an example, like we're ready to go in 24 to 48 hours. We're so much faster in implementation than anybody else out there, because we view time as value. And so we want to make the changes quick, and we're not afraid. We're not waiting for it to be perfect before we implement. We'll implement before it's imperfect, and then we'll start to make it more perfect. It never gets perfect because we break it again, but we're not waiting for perfection to implement. So I think the end of the day is, like, I don't like details. Like, I'll sit in a meeting and I'm like drifting off, and my team knows that. And they're like, look, you know, I have 5 minutes of Scott's time because I know he's in a different world, and it's not going to be there. The people who are involved in processes and procedures are people like you who like love the detail, love the system, love the process, love the procedure. We'll take time to develop and write them and do all these things. That's not me. And
it's not going to be, but you as a visionary, you have the appreciation of how important it is. Because what I've seen is, if you have a visionary that doesn't appreciate it, oh, procedures is not for any, it's not necessary, then you can really not execute the vision. Wouldn't you agree?
yes, and I think as a business owner, you have to be you have to recognize that you have to get out of the way. Like you know, I see so many people like, you know, I'm going to hire a salesman, but I can sell more and I have a higher closing percentage. Well, you may, but you're missing other things in the business that you could be doing because you're out selling product every day. You know, you hear, you know, working in or working on, or whatever the right term is of the business. I mean, look, I'm here every day in my office. I don't think anybody ever comes into my office. Like, it's very rare, with the exception of, what do you want for lunch? Like that's my biggest decision during the day. But having said that, as we get closer to the end of the year, you know, at the beginning of the fourth quarter, that's my time where it's like, okay, let's lay out the plan. Here's what our vision is. How are we going to fix things? You know, we got to move quickly. And so we do that on a planning process. Right now, we're, you know, looking at upgrading our CRM. I'm involved in the decision. I'm involved in the communication, the conversations, but I'm ultimately not going to make the decision because it's not me who's going to implement it. I have my idea of what I would prefer, but it's my job to build a consensus in my staff to everybody who's on this team that is going to implement this, that we're all in agreement and alignment. It's not my job to make the decision. It's my job to bring everybody to the same point to make the collective decision. And you know, it just goes back to you can't do it any other way, because the more you're involved, the lower the quality of your management team will be, because they don't want to be here if you're going to micromanage it.
For sure. Absolutely. Scott, tell us about the HeavySet Technologies. That's the software that you are the co-founder of.
Yes, so HeavySet Technologies is a company that it started out as something that we were using that basically allows somebody to set an appointment with never having to speak to a call center representative. And effectively what it does is it in real time updates the calendar for the homeowner, so that the homeowner can click on a link in your website or lead aggregator, whatever you're using, and allows the homeowner to set a lead without talking to somebody. And then it's also confirmed by AI. So what we find is that every night, you know, over the course of a night between, let's say, 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock the next morning, we'll set 40 to 50 leads a day from consumers who don't speak to a customer service rep in our call center. What's interesting,
so they set an appointment. They set an appointment, and it's on the books.
correct. So it's like Amazon. You're like Amazon, open 24 hours a day. But the larger implication of it is that, number one, you can advertise when your competitors are not advertising. You can reach people that you would normally, like a factory worker who's working the overnight shift, you would never reach him because he's never there when you're open, but now he can schedule an appointment. And what we find is that the person who sets an appointment using this technology has a higher average sale, lower cancellation rate on the lead, and a higher closing percentage on the lead. So
I
it's
wanted to ask you, so the
service.
cancellation, like, because, you know, I mean, statistics show, I experienced that, you experienced that, you know, when it's a cold call, when, you know, it's when you don't have that human touch, or at least maybe that's the misconception that, you know, it might be they just schedule something and then no show. I mean, you don't experience that?
Well, it's confirmed by AI. So effectively what we're doing is we're confirming and asking whatever qualifying questions we would normally ask in person, we ask using AI. And as a result of that, what we find is that the homeowner is more accepting of it. But also what's interesting is we have about 70 people in our call center. Our call center confirmation department competes against the AI. So it's because we publish the numbers. So it's making them better, which in turn makes our business better. But the biggest advantage of it is that we're not selling it on the basis of it being it replacing your call center. It's in addition to your call center. So if, for example, you call 3 companies and everybody gives you the same script, by the time you call this 4th company, you're like, I can't listen to this anymore. Great, here you go. Use AI or use HeavySet. At night when you're shopping, use HeavySet. So there's significant advantages to it, and I'm minimizing a lot of it just to keep it simple. But
Sure.
the bottom line is we developed it internally. I showed it to some friends of mine. They're like, we really want it, and we turned it into a business that I think now we have 40 or 50 customers who are using it and having a lot of success with it. The biggest thing I can tell you is that as leads get more expensive, you have to have more visibility and access to the consumer. So,
and you have to make it also, look, some people want to talk, some people don't. Like for me, when I heard that, it was like, perfect. That's what I would like. I mean, I don't have time to call during the day. My husband doesn't either. Then I have to get my assistant to call and ask all those questions. And how do you spell your ad? It's all those things, as opposed to just boom, I can set an appointment. I can see the calendar. I can set an appointment. I can figure out what is convenient for me. I've done it at 9 o'clock at night and I'm done. And that is, I think, the majority, a lot of the population is going to gravitate towards that. I don't know if a lot, but a segment of the population, especially the younger generation, that's the way they operate because they do everything. I mean, they order their food online. You know, we order Amazon. You know, we just think about it. Scott.
That's exactly right. And
Right?
as I said, it's not in lieu of, it's in addition to. So
Yeah.
what we find is that if we're able to fill our calendar quicker and more efficiently, and our marketing costs go down, which just makes the company more profitable. But it goes back to, your process and procedures, which is if we didn't realize that we were missing a lot of calls and unable to reach people at hours when they're not home, we would have never developed this. So it goes to show you that if you're evaluating your business on a continual basis, you're evaluating those processes, you're evaluating those procedures, you realize the shortcomings of where you are, and you're able to address them. Without wanting to address or improve process and procedures, your company's not successful. It just isn't, because you can't possibly scale if you don't have those in place.
Absolutely. So do you advertise that you're open 24/7 for scheduling? I mean, how do people know that? Like, let's say I was researching windows in Florida. I want a replacement windows, and I'm sitting on the website on my computer, and I see 3 different companies. Do you advertise that you can make an appointment 24 hours a day, or how
Yes,
do you?
we encourage you to set an appointment using HeavySet. Like, we want you to use it. We on our website, on our direct mail, any print, you have a phone number and the option of scanning a barcode and going right to HeavySet. You can do either one. But most of the people, depending on what's ironic is depending on the advertising medium, will dictate how they reach you. So like a lead aggregator, which we don't use a lot of, but when we do, the call comes in, or the inquiry comes into our CRM, and then immediately we send the text out, and we give the customer the option to schedule an appointment using HeavySet, or saying then we'll call you, whatever's more convenient. So it's giving the consumer choice. But what's also interesting is it makes us appear more professional and more sophisticated than our competitor. So it's people want they get their news instantly. They get everything. Everybody's in a rush. So here we are in a rush, and we're saying, okay, wait 12 hours, wait 5 minutes, wait 10 minutes, schedule an appointment. They don't want that. They want to know right now. So this eliminates that delay, and it gives the consumer flexibility in terms of never having to speak to somebody.
Beautiful. Scott, if people want to get in touch with you, there are people listening to us right now, and they go, okay, I want to talk to Scott. I want to find out how he did it. I want advice from him. I want him to mentor me. Whatever, they want to reach out to you. How can they do that?
You can email me at scott@floridawindowanddoor.com, all spelled out. And I'll respond to you, and we can figure out how I can help you and what you need. And I'm happy to do that for you.
Awesome. Scott, it's been a pleasure to have you on this podcast. A lot of very good information that I'm sure our listeners will find very valuable. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Abby.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.